Welcome to another edition of Lifetimes on Cogeco Cable 14. This is our part 2 of our visit with Pastor Don Rogers. Don, last week we only got started talking about the Rogers family. And I think we could do 3 or 4 shows just talking about the family. There are a couple of things I'd like to just follow up on and hear comments. One, from what I've heard through Paul Mosier's notes that he took with you, the Salem Public School was rather a wild place when we were going there. And I want to know whether it was you that was causing it or the other kids.
I was the young one, so I had to clean up the mess. No, there were some humorous things, even in my day. I went to school with the age group of Dick Johnson and Dan Schaefer and my cousin Bob Rogers and Dave Cothra, and some of the folks listening will recognize those names. Dan Schaefer was a mischief maker in the school, and he used to get a hold of a board off the seat of the school, off the desk rather, and use it like a toboggan, going down the old steps. The steps there, the ceiling in the lower level had to be 12 feet high. It was a very high anyway, and so the long set of steps, and made a wonderful set of stairs for tobogganing. And get there in the morning before the teacher, and toboggan down you can imagine the racket going down these steps on a piece of board, you know. And I guess one day he just got to the bottom. He actually hit a wall at the bottom, and right beside there was the door, and he no sooner hit the bottom and opened the door was the teacher named Hugh Chamney. So he put an end to that tobogganing career. The other thing that used to happen, the whole school, it's the old school still in Salem, across the road from the service station in Salem there. It was a 2-room school, up one upstairs and down, grades 1 to 4 down, grades 5 to 8 upstairs. Well, upstairs, the whole place was heated with one furnace, one great big register, and the kids would get there early in the cold morning, cover the register with their boots and mitts and keep the heat from coming up, open the windows and put snow behind the thermometer, because if it was cold enough, the teacher let you go home. So,
manufactured holiday.
Yeah. Now, believe it or not, I honestly was I was kind of a timid kid, I guess. I saw this stuff happening, but I was too scared to get involved in it. I just enjoyed the day off if they managed to pull it off.
Pull it off. You never did tell.
No.
There's another story, too, isn't there, about you discovering your brothers?
Oh, yeah.
Played hooky one day, too.
I was walking home from school, and my dad had a little barn that was a little ways from the house. Walked right by it, and I could hear kids up and jumping in the haymow. And so I went up to investigate who was up there. It was my brothers and sisters up there having a great time jumping in the hay, but they were playing hooky from school. So they promised me nickels and pennies and dimes and so on if I wouldn't tell. And if any of them are watching, I want my brothers and sisters to know, Bob, I've never got my nickels and dimes to this day.
They never paid off?
They never paid off.
Well, there's a message there. We'll have to have this tape ready for you the next time the family's together and you can play it. Take a collection.
Yeah.
The first house, too, that your father owned is an interesting story, too. And I think one other aspect was that it's amazing how much times have changed. Yeah. And when you talk about bathroom facilities in that first house, this is a pretty interesting story, too.
It really was the second house. We owned the house behind the Boer implement place, the little frame house, and then Father sold that, bought a house on the Salem Road, just coming up around the bridge at the top of the hill if you're heading
where the mill is, where the mill is there, or not the old
mill?
Yeah,
if you came across the bridge at the mill and up around the curve, and then it was the first house on the right. It's since the top of it burnt down, and the new people have rebuilt the top on it there. But anyway, he bought that for $800. He later on bought the field of land that went from the mill away down. There's all these very expensive homes down there now along the gorge. My father owned that whole field, and anyway, there was no bathroom facilities in either house, either the first house or this other one. And they raised 11 kids without a bathroom. And I would guess 10 or 11 years old before we got running water in the house. When I was a kid, I used to run to the pump to pump a bucket of water. And at night, I used to hate it at night, because just going out the door, my dad would say, "Watch out for the boogeymen." And I had to run to the pump, which would be 100 feet away, and pump a bucket of water and bring it back.
Now, the outside toilet facilities that would have to be fairly adequate too.
They were adequate, and we had a two-seater, Bob.
Two-seater?
So if times got really tough,
it was a share.
and it got upset every Halloween night, and usually my own brothers and sisters were the ones that upset it.
Really?
Yeah, they were rascals.
Would they have to put the darn thing back up again then, or not?
Well, yeah, my dad would make them put it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my dad used to have a lot of fun trying to catch them on Halloween night. One year, I helped my dad drive stakes in the lawn, and about 6 inches off the ground, we strang a strand of wire, so they'd trip and fall. And sure enough, that year he yelled at them out there trying to upset the shanty, and they took off, and they were fall on the lawn right, left, and center.
I don't know. That certainly was probably the most popular Halloween trick that was ever played. Was
Right.
with knocking over the, especially if you lived in a smaller community where there was a lot of it.
Yeah.
It was the thing to do.
Bob, it was on my father's 70th birthday when my brothers and sisters, we all went together and bought my mother and dad a bathroom set. So we are all raised, married, and gone before they got a bathroom in the house. And my one brother was a plumber. He did the plumbing, and others were carpenters, and they built a little room and put the bathroom in.
I can't help but think about the hard work your mother must have done over the years with washing clothes, even. I mean, to think there was...
When you're young, you don't realize it, but now, as I think back, I don't know how she did it. I can remember in the heat of the summer, she'd have the old wood stove, coal stove going, doing down preserves,
Yeah.
you know. Well, bath day was another experience, you know.
I bet.
My memories, my dad got a hold of an old bathtub, and he put it in a bedroom right above the kitchen sink. We had to carry the water up to it, but we could pull the plug, and he had a garden hose drain into the kitchen sink. So you'd have to my mother would heat water in this great big copper kettle, and we'd have to get two people to carry that thing upstairs, pour the hot water in, carry some more cold water to balance it out. Everybody bathed in the same water, and I'm the youngest, and I was always last to get in there. But you know, I was watching television one day, Bob, and they said the reason there's so many allergies around these days is we're too clean. And I burst out laughing. I thought, well, that's why we're healthy.
That's why you've never been in the hospital, Don. God bless you. You know, that's probably the big reason why you haven't been to the hospital yet.
I got thinking that maybe there was some advantage in being last in the bathtub, you know?
Well, there probably was.
A build up an immune system.
But the work that was done with the family at large, it astounds me, though, as to how the mother would go through it all.
It was night and day.
You know, were there chores to be done, too, with all the kids when they were at home?
Yeah. Those that were home, we all had. I remember my job was carrying the coal upstairs and the wood and whatnot for the fire.
Yeah. Now, your father, where did he work? What was he doing all these years?
My father was always in woodwork. He worked in, I think he worked in Walser's and Mundell's factories, but then he also did a lot of carpentry jobs. He had a pretty severe wound in his back from the First World War, so he had some limitations. He used to wear a very heavy metal harness on his back, and sometimes he couldn't work because his back got so bad. But yeah, it was always carpentry type of work that he did.
Isn't it wonderful when you look back today, though, and have mostly good memories?
Yeah.
In talking to you, that's what would appear to be true.
Yeah, there were, like, I can remember some big arguments in the house, you know, like every family has their times.
Well, family are people, too, aren't they?
Yeah. But by and large, there was a lot of memories. And tough times, you know, we look back and we think tough times are bad, but tough times aren't always bad for us. You build a lot of relationships in tough times, pulling together.
Right. I can't stay away from asking you about Jimmy, which is, and I guess the reason I'm asking is that with our formerly called Living Legends, we had really wanted to do Jimmy and had planned to do it. And whatever happened, every time that we planned to do it, something would interfere and we didn't get it done. And then, unfortunately, he died. But I've heard so many people talk about this man as being such a colorful person.
And I understand you didn't get to meet Jim.
I never got to meet him.
No.
So tell me a little bit with Jimmy. Because I think you said before, last week, that he was a favorite.
Yeah, when I was just a little kid, you see, my two older brothers were gone to war, so Jim was my older brother. So he's kind of my hero in those early childhood days. And Jim was always a bit of a character. He was always had a mischief in him.
Now, which side of the family do you think he got that from? Did it come from your mother or from your father?
I think probably from my father, because my father always had a bit of a cut-up side to him, you know. And there's a whole lot more I can tell you about that. We need 4 or 5 programs here, Bob. But yeah, Jim probably got it from my dad. But he just was a likable character, I guess. See, when I got married when I was 20 and I was away from Elora for 34 years, where Jim was still here. For the most part, he did live in Oakville for a while. But he just got well known. He became president of the Legion and got quite involved in the whole Army soldier kind of things.
And he'd been involved in the television side, too, in later years, wasn't he, or not, as doing that type of work? Or am I wrong?
Yeah,
with video materials.
Excuse me. He did carpentry work and then eventually got into a roofing business. And then he had a heart problem and he had to give that up. And so he got into a video business called JR's Video. So a lot of people wouldn't remember him as JR. And he picked that name up from the old Dallas movie.
Show.
So he picked up the JR initials from that.
That says something in itself, doesn't it? But
yeah. So because of his video business, he got to know a lot of people. And a lot of people knew him. I had I don't know, hardly call it a privilege, but you know, the opportunity of conducting his funeral, which was a sad time for all of us. It was here at the church, Bob, and some people in the community told me that it was the biggest funeral they could ever remember in this whole area. So it was a surprise to us that so many people knew him, and a lot of people thought the world of Jim. We played. I asked his wife and family if I could play a tape at the end of that service. As we were leaving the church, we played a tape called "Old Friends," and that spoke of, that's who Jim was. He was an old friend to a lot of people.
So many people.
Yeah, and a lot of people they liked the song, but it made them cry, you know, at the end of that service. But it was a nice tribute to Jim.
And he liked music too, didn't he?
Oh, he loved music, yeah. And Jim liked gospel music. You know, he was not a church-going man, but you get him singing hymns and that, he would just open up and sing at the top of his lungs, you know.
Now, would he give you at any time a hard time about your chosen role in life because of?
No, just teasing.
Teasing, yeah.
Yeah, tease me about the length of my sermons and stuff like that, you know. No, Jim always treated me well. Yeah.
Fond memories.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's talk about you and how you got to where you are today. You at an early age, as I understand it, did have a feeling that this may be what you wanted to do.
Yeah. As young as age 12 or 13, I felt this stirring in my heart, as I would call it, a call to ministry. I actually was a very shy kid. When I was a little gaffer, friends came to visit, and I'd go hide under the bed. And I talked to Paul Moser, one of your folks helping us here today, and even Paul said we went to high school together. I probably would seem like more of the unlikely ones to, you know, do this kind of thing. I was afraid to tell anybody. My dad had a remarkable conversion experience through the death of my little baby sister.
Now, is this when he first became connected to the Pentecostal?
Yeah. When she died at 6 weeks of age, with pneumonia, the Pentecostal minister was the only minister my dad knew, and the way he knew him is he had gone with some other guys to make fun of the meetings. In those days, they called them holy rollers. Because Pentecostals worship by lifting their hands and clapping, and so my dad would go to make fun of these meetings. But anyway, when my sister died, he contacted the minister to see if he'd conduct the funeral. I understand my grandfather built a little coffin, my aunt lined it with silk, and this Pentecostal minister conducted the funeral. And he led my mother and dad into a conversion experience, prayed with them, and they opened their heart to the Lord. And at my father's funeral, that was here in this church as well, a lady said to me, she said, Don, if you only would have known your dad before and after his conversion. I guess there was quite a dramatic change in him. The man that led my dad to the Lord went through a moral failure later. And my dad never told me this, but I think that disillusioned my father. And my father became somewhat disillusioned with church, and he stopped going regularly to church. He would go off and on. And he became, he's my father, and I hate to say this about him, but it's true. He became cynical about Christians and church. So here I am, this shy little kid, that I'm afraid to tell my father that I would feel called to the ministry for fear of what he would say, that I would never measure up to his expectations.
Don, expand a bit, because you used the phrase before and you just used it again about being called to the ministry at that age.
Yeah.
And you're looking back now and you feel that. What was that experience? What was that call that came? Was it inside yourself that you just had this feeling?
It was just this inside. It was like I was visualizing myself preaching. The prophet Jeremiah said it's like the word of God shut up in my bones, like fire in my bones. I just got to get it out, you see, and not knowing how. Well, I didn't really pursue that seriously. I didn't know how. And by age 20, I got married, and in the process, there was a young man that, a friend of mine from Toronto, that encouraged me to begin to pursue it. The long and short of it is, I was married for about 9 years when I finally came back to Salem and talked to the pastor in Salem.
There was a Pentecostal church in Salem at that point, too?
Pastor Bill McMillan, who had been in Salem for 27 years or so. And he steered me and helped me in the right direction, got me involved in a correspondence Bible course, and got me connected with the superintendent of the Pentecostal
Now, had you
Assembly.
talked it over with your family at that point, with your mother and father, or not?
No, I had just on my own. I had done a little weekend preaching here and there as the opportunity came along. And I had given leadership to the youth department in this old Salem church, so I had a little bit of opportunity here and there of some exposure in public leading, but I've never seriously got into this, developing it, until I came back and talked to him. So I never did go to my family for advice or anything about ministry. I just felt on my own that way, and a lot of it had to do with the cynicism that had developed, which was unfortunate, but just happened.
Had your father lost his belief in God at that time too, or was it mainly the church?
So
no, he still had a.
I've thought many times about my dad. My dad had super high expectations of Christians. And I think he felt frustrated because he couldn't be that himself, and other people couldn't be that. And I almost had a nervous breakdown at one point in my life, because when I really realized what was going on, I was trying to be the kind of person that my father thought a Christian should be, and I couldn't be it. I realized that it's only through the power of the Holy Spirit that we can be anything of much value.
Don, it's an interesting...
And I don't mean that as criticism of my father.
No.
I love my dad, and I often wish I could have had opportunity to talk about those things with him.
You mentioned the phrase high expectations, and is that not something that is an ongoing life problem, if you will, with people?
Oh, yeah.
Is that exists in families too, don't they?
Sure.
In which you have
and people,
huge expectations for family members that sometimes don't live up to what those expectations
and it can be disaster for children if parents place too high of expectations on the children. Children need to be loved for who they are, not for what they do. And this performance-based acceptance is not a healthy thing. God loves us for who we are, not because of how well we perform.
Right. And
It's the same pattern.
and that's us loving others too on the same terms.
Yeah.
So let's go back for a second then. You take a correspondence course
Yeah.
in Bible studies.
Took up a correspondence course, and the district superintendent got me involved in a little church in Southampton, a small little congregation of.
Nice little community up there.
Yeah, there was, I think, 12 or 15 people when we first arrived there. And
Now, you were married at this point?
married with 3 children by this time. And
what were you going to feed yourself with at this
well,
point?
I was going to have to get a job, and I had trouble getting a job. But it's hard to get everything in here at one program, Bob. But I had done some work in a dairy, and so I got a job in the dairy in Port Elgin after 3 or 4 months. Very interesting thing happened during that period of time. We were running out of what little bit of savings we had. We were running out of money. And on a Sunday, I said to my wife, I don't know what I'm going to do. This week we got to have some money. So I decided I would drive from Southampton to Salem and visit Pastor McMillan, just for advice, and because he had been helping me with advice. And so when I got down to Salem, I dropped into my mother's house on a Monday morning. Totally unknown to me, the Salem Pentecostal Church had received a grocery shower for us the day before on a Sunday. I had a 1959 Ford that had a big trunk, and I had all these groceries were at my mother's house, and they had no idea how they were going to get them to me. I showed up Monday morning. I had the trunk was full, the back seat was full, and the front seat was full beside me of groceries. So Pastor McMillan wasn't home. I went to Guelph to see the Pentecostal minister there, whom I also knew, and he was quite interested in Southampton. Told him my story, having trouble finding a job and so on. He gave me a check for $100, which was a lot of money in 1966, and went back home with $100 and all these groceries. Got a job that Thursday in the dairy.
There were some big signs
Yeah.
that week, weren't there?
Yeah. So I worked in the dairy, studied the correspondence course, and pastored the church all at the same time, and survived through it somehow.
And then let's not go through. Let's get you to Ferguson, Aurora,
Okay.
in the interest of time now, because you did do work elsewhere for a while.
Yeah, I
too.
pastored several places in Ontario.
Right. And then coming back here must have been
Yes.
interesting.
Jack
experience.
Ozard was the pastor here, and he phoned me.
Now, let me ask you, this was in this church where it now exists
Yeah.
today? Yeah.
This church was born out of Salem and Fergus going together. The 2 congregations went together in 1978 and formed Central Pentecostal Church. I grew up in the Salem church. When Jack Ozard phoned me and said, Don, he was leaving, he said, I have a list of names of potential candidates, and he said, I can't seem to get past your name. I keep thinking that you're the one we should be looking at. And I said, Jack, do you realize that's my home church? Even Jesus didn't have much honor in his hometown. And he said, yes, I realize that. But he said, there's not a lot of people in the church that were there when you were there. So anyway, I pursued it. We had a couple interviews, and then we, in our fellowship, we eventually preach for call. We come and preach for Sunday. The congregation actually vote on you to be their pastor, and I think there was 93% or so voted in favor of me coming. So we've been here over 8 years now, and it's been good. It's like every place has its trying days, but one girl that I had dated once said to Jack Ozard, what am I going to call a pastor that I dated?
What was his answer?
I don't know what she answered him, but I think she calls me Pastor Don, if I'm not mistaken. But I say, my name's Don. Call me that.
But it must have been an interesting experience in the fact that you were, even today, you're dealing with people that you've known the families for a long, long time, probably.
Yeah. There's a lot more people in Aurora know me than I know them, because I was away for so many years. But to this day, I meet people in the post office that say hello to me, and I can't put a name to the face.
Of course, you've become famous on TV now, too.
I guess, yeah. People see me on TV.
Faith in Action is a
through
well-watched
Faith
show.
in Action, and it's hard to know how many people watch it, but
a lot.
I hope they do.
Oh, I'm sure. I want you to say the same thing about Lifetime.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll pat each other on the back at this point. You talked about this well, you didn't say this. I'm going to put your words in your mouth. This job must be very interesting. This is a 7 times 24 type job, is it not?
Yeah. Thankfully, we have staff. Like I have an associate pastor and a youth pastor and a music director, all on paid staff. The music director serves as a secretary as well. I couldn't do it alone. You know, there's too much.
But it's a full-time thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And then we have a host of volunteers that do all kinds of things. We've gone through a couple building programs since I've been here, added a 4,000 or so square foot addition, renovated. We're sitting in the sanctuary. This was all renovated in 1999. It was 20 years old and needed a facelift. And so we've spent a lot of money getting it all updated and so on. But it's a very functional building now. We've got a couple more projects we have to put a new roof on, but we're getting there.
Is there an association with the church in Arthur too then, or not?
Yes, there was a little congregation, what we would call an independent Pentecostal church in Arthur, that struggled for many years, and I encouraged them to affiliate with the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada, and they've done that. And so we encouraged in the neighborhood of 30 people to go there that used to attend here.
It live up in that
Live
area.
up that way, yeah. And so that little church is doing very well. They've tore down the old building and built a new church, and it's doing well.
Don, we're coming to an end of another segment, and there's still lots to talk about.
Yeah.
So thank you again, and please tune in, view us again next week when we talk to Pastor Don Rogers in Elora.